Yo, Darious Britt here. So today we're going to be sharing tips on how to make a good short film. So shorts can be anywhere from 45 seconds to 40 minutes, but the general rule of thumb is the shorter the better. If you intend to submit your short film to Film Fest once you're done with it, then you probably want to keep it between a minute to 15 minutes because they're much easier to program. Audiences in general tend to favor shorter short films over longer short films, i.e. a short film that is like 1 minute to 5 or 10 minutes is going to fare a lot better than a short film that's 20 to 30 minutes or even 40 minutes because the longer short films are much more of a time commitment. Almost, but not always. There are exceptions as usual. You want to keep the film really short because it's not going to be as time consuming or costly to make. Time is not free, and when you have a hungry crew to feed, it can get a little costly. And that brings us to our first tip: know your resources. A common mistake is being overly ambitious with your projects. If you don't have access to horses, or you don't own horses, or you don't have a boatload of cash, don't write a Western, and don't write car chase scenes. That's going to cost you a lot of time, money, and resources that you don't have. These things are all very ambitious for a short film. There are exceptions. If you have a ton of money and a ton of experience, then for sure, go shoot a Western or a car chase scene. If you only have access to modest resources, then think smaller. Show, don't tell. Everybody's heard this rule, but still a lot of people don't listen to it because there's an awful lot of really chatty, talky shorts out there. Film is a visual medium. You communicate with images. You're telling stories with pictures. It's the most economic way to tell a story. And when you're making a short film, it's all about economy. If you're trying to communicate someone's an alcoholic, show him drinking. If you're trying to communicate someone's a bully, show him picking on someone. As an audience member, things tend to stick a lot better when you see it for yourself and not just hear about it. You want to start off with a strong open. The way you open your film is super important. It's the very first impression you're making with your audience. So you don't want to open your film with just like dialogue or two people sitting in a room talking. I mean, if you're going to have talking, have it be an argument. You should start off with some action, some conflict, or an interesting shot, something powerful, something engaging, something that's going to hook your audience. And next up, conflict. Conflict is king. Why is conflict king? Because it gets your attention. It's something we can all relate with. We all tussle with conflict in our lives. When's the last time you've watched a movie where there was nothing happening to any of the characters and you actually sat through the whole thing? You haven't, right? Because it gets boring. There's nothing to watch. You need conflict in your story. Conflict allows you to see what your characters are made of. Try to infuse it into every scene. Even if you have a scene with two friends just talking to each other, get conflict in there. They don't have to be enemies. They don't have to be screaming and arguing. Even with your friends, you know, when you hang around your friends, there's always this kind of unspoken power dynamic between you. Maybe one makes a couple personal jabs at the other, just jesting, just having fun, but that's still conflict. Your short film is not a feature film. You can't jam 2 hours worth of content into 10 minutes. It's not going to happen. You want to minimize your backstory. You don't want to pick subject matter that has a ton of backstory that you have to fill the audience in on. If you spend 3 minutes of your 5-minute short film showing flashbacks and explaining everything that happened before the film started, your story is going to be very clunky, flabby, and unengaging. Try to avoid using narration. This is one of those narrative tools that has been overused to the point of being cliche. And yes, some stories work off narration and some stories need narration, but most stories that do don't need it. Oftentimes you'll see narration used in ways where it's only reinforcing what we're already seeing. It's not really adding anything to the storytelling. If you do use narration, it should contradict or be ironic to what we're seeing. For instance, narration tells us that this guy Johnny can get any chick that he wants and he's smooth with women, but what we actually see on screen is him getting slapped in the face by a chick. That's ironic. It contradicts what we're seeing. So the narration in this case is adding value to the story. It's adding content. It's adding another perspective, if not just humor. But it's doing something that is enriching the way we're translating what we're seeing. You should pick subject matter that's filmic. And by filmic, I mean something you can point a camera at. There's a reason why action movies, the hero's always after a briefcase or codes or a CD or money or drugs, because all of these subject matters are filmic. You can point a camera at it. We know the story's over when Chucky carves up the babysitter or the boyfriend kisses the girlfriend or the hero gets the suitcase full of money. Because we can see it. The opposite would be making a story about someone who's depressed and trying to find thoughts to get himself out of his mood, or trying to find happiness in really, really small things. That's not filmic. That's not something you can point a camera at. Now, if you show someone getting depressed, but then striving to get his medication and you make some kind of suspense out of it, that's filmic. So try to infuse your characters with a goal that is outside of themselves, something we can point a camera at. Then your story will be much more filmic and easier to communicate without dialogue. or narration. Many of the best shorts tend to revolve around an event or an isolated moment. By an isolated event, I mean you have your protagonist who is presented with an obstacle or conflict, and with that conflict comes a choice. He's got to make a choice to resolve that obstacle or that conflict, but there are stakes on either side and there are pros and cons to either choice, which makes it a dilemma. He chooses one and then there is a resolution. And usually when you write an event-based story, it can happen in one location, as in one game of pool, one night, one date, at dinner, at a party, you know, but one spot where this thing happens to this person and they are forever changed after whatever choice they made. When you're writing your script, you want to try and keep your characters to a minimum, because the last thing you want is to hire a whole bunch of actors and open yourself up to the risk of someone dropping out on you. Have maybe 2, 3, 4 characters at the most, but don't write an ensemble cast. If you're asking actors to work for free with a promise of maybe a DVD copy or something afterwards, then you know you stand a much higher risk of someone dropping out on you before or during the shoot. Or after, when you need ADR from them. That sucks too. The same thing for locations. The fewer the better. There's a reason why most stories happen at 1 or 2 locations, because it's much more easier to manage as far as money, as far as crew and equipment. Try and write for locations that are interesting to look at and practical. There's a short that takes place in an elevator. It's interesting, it's practical, very controllable. When you think more along the lines of practicality, you'll find yourself not pulling your hair out as much. Take risks. You have the advantage of asking an audience for a small portion of their time. You can follow an unlikable character in a short film because it's only like 10 minutes. But with a feature film, it's really hard to ask an audience to follow a character that they don't like for an hour and a half. So take risks, explore. And this one I know everybody's heard a million times, but it is so true. Write what you know. Your stories tend to be much more authentic and original when it comes from a place of honesty and a place of experience. And lastly, if you want to make a short film or you want to get good at making shorts, watch a ton of shorts. Not only will you get a lot of ideas, but you get a good sense of what's already out there and what's already been done and redone. After you watch 100 short films, you'll have a pretty good idea of what the cliches are out there. You'll be less prone to follow a cliche if you've seen that same cliche done in like 20 other movies. And that's all I got for you. If you liked what you saw, please like and subscribe. If you really liked it, then share it with your family or your grandma or your dog. And yeah. So we're sending our movie out to California to get a professional color grade and sound mix done. Yeah. So over the next week, the goal is to package the film up and get it ready to be sent off to California at a